God is good. God is good.
Who gave you that name, and how do you think it shaped the man you are today?
I'm a Babalawo, and my mom, when I was born.
Right there, you could hear it. He said, I'm a Babalawo, and my mom.
I'm a Babalawo, and my mom.
A Babalawo meaning he's from the Ifa religion. In that religion, they worship Aludamari. Aludamari is the creator God, not Yahweh.
God has a lot to do with the success and the blessings that we have, and understanding that it's above us.
Did Hollywood's golden boy just trade the church pews for ancient African rituals? Or did he just expose a secret that the industry has been trying to bury for decades? Imagine being at the absolute peak of your career, holding the most prestigious award in cinema, looking the entire world in the eye, and thanking a power that completely terrifies the mainstream establishment. That is exactly what just happened, and the internet is currently experiencing a total unhinged meltdown. Michael B. Jordan didn't just win. He chose the biggest stage in human history to casually drop a spiritual bomb that left traditional commentators clutching their pearls and digital trolls digging up old footage like desperate detectives. Within minutes, the narrative flipped from a celebration of cinematic excellence to a full-blown spiritual warfare campaign on social media, with self-proclaimed experts claiming he has officially entered an elite, ancient African cult. But is this actually a sudden, scandalous betrayal of his traditional upbringing? Or did a high-profile, devastating breakup with Lori Harvey drive him into the arms of the ancestral spirits for ultimate protection and power? The whispers behind the scenes are getting louder, the leaked receipts are starting to surface, and the truth behind his massive new blockbuster film Sinners suggests this isn't just movie marketing. It is a literal declaration of spiritual independence. Buckle up, because we are about to peel back the heavily guarded layers of Hollywood's most controversial spiritual pivot, and trust me, what we found goes incredibly deep. The entertainment industry wants you to believe that every single celebrity transformation is just a coincidence, a phase, or a clever marketing stunt designed to sell movie tickets. They want you to look at a massive shift in a superstar's entire life and simply look away, but we do not do that here. The truth is always much more calculated, much more expensive, and significantly more scandalous than the official public relations statements would ever dare to admit. What we are witnessing right now with Michael B. Jordan is not a sudden whim, but a highly orchestrated departure from the very foundation that built his public image. For years he was celebrated as the ultimate wholesome, church-going, traditional Hollywood leading man who played by the established rules of the game. He was the safe choice for major studio brands, the perfect gentleman on the red carpets, and the poster boy for traditional American values. But behind that flawless, smiling exterior, a massive storm was brewing within the elite circles of Los Angeles, and the cracks in the armor started showing much earlier than anyone realized. Industry insiders have been whispering for months about intense, closed-door screaming matches between high-level agents and managers who felt their top star was slipping away from their control. The panic in the boardrooms was very real because a celebrity changing their spiritual alignment means changing the entire trajectory of their global brand. When you are a multi-million-dollar asset, your personal beliefs are treated like public property, and any deviation from the standard script is viewed as an immediate financial threat. The higher-ups knew that something major was shifting when Michael began quietly distancing himself from prominent industry mega-churches that usually cater to the Hollywood elite. To fully understand how deep this scandal goes, we have to look back at the chaotic timeline of his highly publicized, devastating relationship and eventual breakup with the ultimate Hollywood legacy star, Lori Harvey. When that relationship imploded, the public was fed the usual garbage line about two young people simply drifting apart due to busy professional schedules. But our exclusive high-level industry sources paint a completely different, much darker picture of what actually went down behind those mansion walls. Rumors are swirling that the relationship was less about romance and more about an intense, high-stakes power struggle involving elite family dynamics and massive branding contracts. Lori Harvey, being Hollywood royalty, represented the absolute peak of mainstream industry acceptance, and her circle expected Michael to conform to a specific, highly controlled lifestyle. The pressure to maintain that perfect, superficial couple image reportedly pushed Michael to his absolute breaking point, leading to an existential crisis that shook him to his core. According to an anonymous source who worked closely on the couple's security detail, Michael felt completely suffocated by the constant surveillance, the fake publicity stunts, and the corporate expectations. The source claims that during one particularly explosive argument right before the breakup, Michael explicitly stated that he was done living a lie just to please corporate sponsors and Hollywood gatekeepers. He was looking for real power, real protection, and an authentic connection that the shallow materialistic culture of modern Hollywood could never provide him. That was the exact moment when the seeds of this massive spiritual defection were planted, setting off a chain reaction that would shock the industry. Immediately following the split, while the media was busy tracking Laurie's next moves, Michael quietly vanished from the usual high-profile celebrity hotspots and nightclub circuits. He reportedly began taking private, unlisted flights to West Africa, specifically Nigeria, under assumed names and with a heavily reduced, non-disclosure-bound security team. Mainstream tabloids completely missed this because they were too busy generating fake narratives about his dating life, but the spiritual underground was already buzzing with his arrival. Leaked travel logs from private aviation firms suggest that Michael spent weeks in sacred, remote locations, far away from the flashing lights of the paparazzi. He wasn't there to vacation or scout movie locations. He was there to meet with top-tier, highly respected spiritual leaders of the ancient Ifa tradition. Our investigative team managed to get in touch with an anonymous cultural consultant who operates within elite Hollywood circles to bridge the gap between stars and traditional spiritualities. This source confirmed that Michael was initiated into the highest levels of the tradition, earning the profound and heavy title of a Babalawo, a father of secrets. This is not some honorary Hollywood title given to wealthy tourists. It requires an intense, grueling process of study, ritual, and complete submission to ancestral wisdom. For a Hollywood megastar to undergo this means he was looking for something far more powerful than a simple lifestyle change. He was looking for spiritual armor to protect himself from the cutthroat, parasitic nature of the entertainment industry that had almost consumed him during his previous relationship. When he returned to Los Angeles, the change in his energy was immediate, palpable, and deeply terrifying to the traditional executives who managed his career. He was no longer the easily manipulated actor who would agree to every single safe, corporate-approved script that landed on his expensive mahogany desk. He began demanding creative control, pulling back from major industry networking events, and surrounding himself exclusively with a tight-knit circle of trusted individuals. The executives were absolutely losing their minds because they realized their golden goose had found a source of authority that was completely outside of their corporate system. You cannot threaten a man with Hollywood cancellation when he truly believes his ancestors and ancient spirits are directly guiding his footsteps. The real panic set in when Michael began collaborating with visionary director RyanCoogler on their massive, highly secretive cinematic project that would eventually be known as Sinners. From the very beginning, this project was treated with an unprecedented level of security, with scripts printed on watermarked paper and actors forced to sign brutal non-disclosure agreements. The industry thought it was just a standard big-budget vampire flick, designed to dominate the box office and bring in hundreds of millions of dollars. But as production moved forward in the Deep South, whispers began leaking out of the set that this film was actually a vehicle for something far more radical. It wasn't just a movie. It was a multi-million-dollar cinematic ritual disguised as mainstream horror, designed to challenge the very foundations of Western religious dominance. Reports from anonymous crew members suggest that the atmosphere on the set of Sinners was unlike anything they had ever experienced in their entire professional careers. Traditional Hollywood film sets are chaotic, commercial, and completely devoid of any real spiritual or emotional depth, but this production felt like a sacred space. Michael and Ryan reportedly brought in traditional spiritual scholars, hoodoo practitioners, and cultural historians as high-paid consultants for every single scene. These were not just accuracy consultants meant to check a box for public relations. They were actively guiding the creative direction of the entire narrative. The crew observed rituals being performed before major scenes, ancestral altars built in the production offices, and a heavy, intense energy that left many traditional workers deeply uncomfortable. The corporate investors and studio executives who were funding the film began receiving frantic, anonymous memos from worried set observers. These leaked memos detailed how the film was intentionally flipping the traditional Hollywood script regarding religion, morality, and spiritual power. In every classic Hollywood horror movie, Christianity is the ultimate force of good, with the holy water and the crucifix being used to defeat the demonic forces of darkness. But Sinners was doing the exact opposite, boldly portraying traditional Western religious structures as tools of historical oppression and spiritual weakness. The memos warned that the film was going to alienate the massive, highly profitable conservative Christian demographic in America, potentially leading to a catastrophic financial disaster at the box office. But Michael B. Jordan completely refused to back down, using his immense star power and leverage to protect the uncompromising vision of the film. He allegedly told the studio heads that if they altered a single frame of the spiritual commentary, he would walk away from the promotional tour entirely. This put the studio in an impossible situation because they had already invested a massive fortune into the production and could not afford a public war with their main star. They were forced to sit back and watch as Michael used their corporate millions to create a piece of art that actively critiqued their entire system. The tension behind the scenes was at an all-time high, with everyone waiting to see how the public would react once the project was finally unleashed. When the film finally hit theaters, the explosion was instantaneous, massive, and completely divided the entire cultural landscape into two warring factions. The mainstream audience was thrilled by the high-octane action and brilliant filmmaking, but the religious community immediately saw right through the entertainment facade. They recognized that the movie was a direct, unapologetic challenge to their belief systems, and the backlash began organizing in the dark corners of social media. Christian commentators, podcasters, and traditional cultural watchdogs started dissecting every single scene, frame, and line of dialogue with a level of intensity usually reserved for political scandals. They realized that this was not just a fictional story, but a highly public manifestation of Michael's personal spiritual defection. The situation turned incredibly toxic when prominent figures within the Black Christian community turned on Michael with a level of ferocity that shocked even seasoned industry insiders. These were the very people who had supported him throughout his entire career, buying tickets to his movies and celebrating his achievements as a victory for the community. But now they felt deeply betrayed, viewing his embrace of African spirituality as a direct attack on the traditional religious institutions that have anchored the community for generations. High-profile Christian hip-hop artists and popular internet ministers began releasing viral videos and lengthy statements calling for a complete and total boycott of the star. They openly labeled the film as demonic propaganda, claiming that Michael was using his massive platform to lead young people away from the church and into the world of ancient witchcraft. As the digital warfare intensified, the accusations grew more extreme, with people digging up every single old interview, red carpet look, and social media post to find hidden symbols. Every gold chain became an amulet, every specific color choice became a ritualistic statement, and every vague caption became a secret message to his spiritual circle. The internet was completely consumed by the controversy, creating a massive, uncontrollable spiral of fake news, wild speculation, and genuine cultural anxiety. But while the public was losing its collective mind online, something far more sinister was developing within the high-level legal and financial departments of the major Hollywood studios, because the corporate masters were preparing to strike back against their rebellious star, setting the stage for a confrontation that would permanently alter his career. The corporate masters of Hollywood do not handle rebellion well, especially when that rebellion involves a multi-million-dollar asset walking away from the cultural script they spent decades writing. Behind the closed doors of major talent agencies and studio boardrooms, high-level executives were quietly holding emergency meetings to discuss how to contain the damage Michael B. Jordan was causing to their financial interests. The major concern was not just the public backlash from conservative groups, but the terrifying realization that they were losing their financial grip on one of the most bankable stars in the world. When a celebrity decides that their ultimate authority comes from an ancient ancestral bloodline, rather than a corporate contract, the traditional threats of Hollywood cancellation completely lose their power. Leaked internal emails from within the studio's risk assessment departments revealed an absolute state of corporate panic over the unfolding situation. Financial analysts were projecting massive losses if the Christian community successfully organized a global boycott of Michael's future projects and commercial endorsements. High-profile corporate sponsors, including major luxury fashion brands and international beverage companies, were reportedly sending frantic inquiries to his management team demanding clarification on his current spiritual status. The corporate world thrives on predictability and safe, watered-down imagery, So seeing their prime global ambassador linked to phrases like ancient rituals and African high priests was their worst nightmare. To make matters significantly more complicated, anonymous sources within the financial sector began whispering about a highly secretive, targeted audit being launched against Michael's production company. It is a well-known secret in Hollywood that when a top-tier star decides to go rogue, the system will often use financial and legal pressure to force them back into submission. Industry insiders claim that several major distribution deals that were previously guaranteed for his upcoming projects were suddenly put on indefinite hold, pending a review of his marketability. The message from the elite gatekeepers was loud and incredibly clear. Fall back in line with the mainstream cultural expectations, or watch your cinematic empire get dismantled brick by brick. But while the corporate suits were busy crunching numbers and drafting legal threats, the situation on the ground was becoming increasingly chaotic as the public breakdown of the scandal took a deeply personal turn. Suddenly, highly detailed and incredibly specific reports began leaking to underground blogs regarding the exact nature of the rituals Michael was allegedly performing in his private life. These leaked reports, which many believe were intentionally put out by rival public relations teams to damage his reputation, described lavish, secretive gatherings at his remote California estate. The reports claimed that Michael had transformed a significant portion of his private property into an enclosed spiritual sanctuary, completely restricted to anyone who had not taken strict vows of secrecy. The anonymous leaks went into graphic detail, claiming that high-ranking spiritual practitioners from across the African diaspora were regularly flying into Los Angeles on private transport funded entirely by the actor. These individuals were allegedly seen carrying traditional ceremonial items, sacred herbs, and rare materials into the estate under the cover of darkness to avoid the prying eyes of neighborly drone cameras. The narrative being spun by the tabloids was designed to make these traditional practices look as terrifying, foreign, and sinister as possible to the average Western consumer. They wanted the public to picture a dark, chaotic cult operation rather than a deeply rooted, highly sophisticated ancestral tradition of healing and spiritual guidance. The public reaction to these specific leaks was an absolute circus of unhinged social media speculation and aggressive digital tribalism. On one side of the internet, conservative commentators were having a field day, using the leaked reports as absolute proof that Michael had completely lost his mind and surrendered to dark, malicious forces. They began producing hours of breakdown videos, analyzing his facial expressions during recent public appearances, claiming that his eyes looked hollow, and that his physical demeanor was proof of spiritual distress. They argued that his departure from traditional Western faith was a cautionary tale of what happens when a young man achieves too much fame and wealth without a proper corporate-approved moral anchor. On the exact opposite side of the digital divide, a massive wave of young, culturally conscious fans rushed to his defense, turning the controversy into a full-blown movement of cultural pride. They pointed out the blatant, deep-seated hypocrisy of a mainstream media machine that celebrates European pagan traditions in movies like Thor and Gladiator, but instantly demonizes African traditions. Social media hashtags defending his right to ancestral reclamation began trending globally, with users sharing educational threads about the true, peaceful nature of the Ifa tradition and the historical brilliance of the Babalawo role. For these fans, Michael was not a villain. He was a heroic figure who was willingly risking his entire mainstream career to validate the hidden history of his people. The drama took an even more sensational turn when an unverified, highly controversial audio clip began circulating on private messaging apps, allegedly capturing a tense phone conversation between Michael and a prominent member of the Harvey family line. In this heavily distorted audio, a voice that sounds remarkably like the Creed superstar can be heard passionately defending his right to protect his own spiritual peace from corporate manipulation. The voice explicitly mentions that the constant pressure to perform a fake, sanitized version of black excellence for the benefit of white corporate structures was destroying his mental health from the inside out. The leak of this audio file sent shockwaves through the entertainment community, because it confirmed that the split from Lori Harvey was deeply tied to this massive ideological warfare. Public relations experts called it one of the most disastrous and uncontrollable celebrity narrative crises in recent memory, as both sides refused to give an inch of ground. Lori Harvey's team immediately issued a sharp, clinical public statement completely distancing her from any of the spiritual controversies surrounding her former partner, stating that she remains entirely focused on her business ventures and mainstream branding. This strategic move was clearly designed to protect her own highly lucrative corporate relationships from being dragged down by the chaotic, radioactive nature of Michael's public trial. The contrast between the two stars could not have been more striking. One was playing the safe, traditional Hollywood corporate game perfectly, while the other was burning the entire playbook to the ground. As the media storm reached a fever pitch, several mainstream talk show hosts and late-night comedians began weighing in on the controversy, using sarcasm and humor to defuse the massive cultural tension. Some joked that Michael was simply taking his method acting for his role in Sinners to an extreme, ridiculous level that his publicists could no longer handle. Others pointed out that in Hollywood, changing your religion is practically a rite of passage for elite stars, comparing his situation to high-profile figures who famously embraced alternative spiritual systems in the past. But despite the attempts to laugh it off, everyone within the industry knew that the undercurrent of this specific situation was far more volatile and politically charged than a standard Hollywood phase. The real danger for Michael's career began to manifest when several major theater chains in highly conservative regions of the country reported a sharp, noticeable drop in advance ticket sales for his upcoming cinematic projects. Local religious leaders in these communities were actively standing on pulpits, instructing their entire congregations to avoid any media content associated with the actor's name. This was the first tangible piece of evidence showing that the digital backlash was crossing over into the real world, threatening the actual box office bottom line that Hollywood cares about above all else. The studio executives realized that their containment strategies were failing completely, and that they needed to take drastic, unprecedented action to protect their financial investments. Behind the scenes, pressure was being applied to RyanCoogler to release a public statement clarifying that Sinners was purely a work of fictional entertainment, with absolutely no real-world religious or political implications. The studio bosses wanted the director to essentially apologize for the film's controversial themes and assure the mainstream public that the production team held the utmost respect for traditional values. But according to insider sources close to the director's production company, Coogler stood entirely firm alongside Michael, completely refusing to compromise the artistic integrity or the spiritual authenticity of their shared creation. The two men had formed an unbreakable, highly defiant alliance against the corporate machine, creating a massive, unprecedented stalemate that left the studio heads completely paralyzed with fear. This internal corporate warfare was quietly reaching a boiling point when a massive, unexpected development occurred within the legal world, completely changing the entire landscape of the controversy. A high-profile, ultra-conservative legal advocacy group announced that they were officially launching a formal petition to investigate the production practices of Sinners, claiming that public funds and tax incentives were used to promote discriminatory and anti-traditional rhetoric. This sudden legal escalation elevated the situation from a standard social media debate into a serious institutional threat that could potentially tie up the film's profits in litigation for years to come. The announcement of this legal probe sent a massive chill through the entire creative community in Los Angeles, as artists realized that the system was willing to use the full weight of the law to punish ideological nonconformity. MichaelBJordan was no longer just an actor defending his personal beliefs. He was now standing at the absolute center of a dangerous, historical precedent regarding creative freedom and cultural expression in modern America. The stakes had never been higher, the tension was completely unbearable, and the entire world was watching to see what the next move would be in this high-stakes game of spiritual chess, as the unfolding fallout began to trigger a series of unprecedented consequences that no one in Hollywood was prepared to face. The institutional threats against MichaelBJordan and the creators of Sinners quickly escalated from empty social media posturing into a terrifying reality that shook the foundation of the entertainment industry. The formal petition launched by conservative legal groups gained immediate traction, forcing state film commissions to launch an unprecedented investigation into the massive tax incentives granted to the production. This strategic move was clearly designed to hit the creators exactly where it hurts the most, targeting the financial lifelines that make these big-budget cultural projects possible in the first place. If the state decided to revoke those multi-million-dollar tax rebates, it would mean total financial ruin for the independent investors who bravely backed Michael's radical vision. As the legal pressure intensified, rumors began circulating about a secret, emergency meeting held at a secure location in Beverly Hills, where top-tier Hollywood power players gathered to decide the actor's professional fate. According to an anonymous source who handles communications for one of the major studios involved, the atmosphere inside that room was pure chaos, with executives demanding a complete and total containment strategy. The major fear among the elite gatekeepers was that Michael's open defiance would inspire a massive wave of other high-profile black creators to break away from their corporate contracts and reclaim their own cultural narratives. The system relies entirely on total compliance, and seeing its biggest star completely ignore their threats was creating a dangerous precedent that they could not allow to stand. The financial fallout spread with brutal speed through the corporate world, as two major international brands officially announced that they were terminating their lucrative endorsement contracts with MichaelBJordan. The official press releases used vague, sanitized language about corporate restructuring and shifting marketing priorities, but everyone within the industry knew the real reason behind the sudden drop. These multi-billion-dollar corporations were absolutely terrified of being dragged into a highly volatile, deeply polarizing cultural war involving ancient African spiritualities and traditional Western religious systems. They chose to protect their global bottom lines, sacrificing their relationship with one of the most recognizable faces in the world just to appease conservative consumer watchdogs. But if the corporate masters thought this financial strangulation would force Michael to his knees, they completely miscalculated the resolve of the initiated Babalawo. Instead of hiring a high-price crisis public relations team to draft a fake, weeping apology to the public, Michael responded with a move that completely stunned his detractors. He quietly used his own considerable wealth to purchase a massive tract of land in the Deep South, rumored to be near the historic Yoruba village of Oyatunji. Insiders claim that this land is being developed into a fully independent cultural center, sanctuary, and film production studio dedicated entirely to preserving and celebrating African diaspora spiritual traditions. This massive real estate move proved to the entire world that Michael was not just playing a character, or going through a temporary midlife identity crisis after his breakup with Lori Harvey. He was actively building a physical infrastructure to support his spiritual independence, completely bypassing the traditional Hollywood studio system that had controlled his life for decades. The news of this independent studio venture sent shockwaves through the talent agencies in Los Angeles, as A-list actors and writers began quietly inquiring about how they could get involved with this new, uncancelable creative haven. The gatekeepers realized that their traditional weapons of financial blacklisting and media character assassination were losing their power entirely against a man who was willing to build his own sandbox. Meanwhile, the digital warfare surrounding the movie Sinners reached a truly bizarre, unhinged climax as mainstream religious groups organized massive, synchronous prayer vigils outside of major movie theaters across the country. These groups stood in circles, holding crosses and reciting prayers, claiming that they were actively engaging in spiritual warfare to protect the youth from the demonic influence of the film. The imagery of these protests looked like something straight out of a Hollywood horror film itself, creating a bizarre meta-narrative that only served to drive even more curious viewers into the theaters to see what the chaos was truly about. The controversy was backfiring spectacularly on the critics, turning Sinners into an absolute counterculture phenomenon that people felt obligated to watch. The public reaction took an even more dramatic turn when several prominent cultural anthropologists and historians began appearing on independent news networks to challenge the mainstream media's biased coverage of the scandal. These experts boldly called out the deep-seated systemic racism and historical ignorance that allowed traditional practices like Ifa and Hoodoo to be continuously labeled as witchcraft or cult behavior. They argued that the vicious attack on Michael B. Jordan was nothing more than a modern-day manifestation of the same brutal suppression that enslaved Africans faced when their spiritualities were stripped away from them centuries ago. This intellectual defense shifted the entire conversation, turning Michael into a symbolic figure for a much broader struggle for historical truth and spiritual freedom. As the weeks rolled on, the intense pressure began to create visible cracks within the traditional religious opposition itself, as a growing movement of progressive theologians began defending the star's choices. These independent ministers released a collaborative manifesto arguing that a person's reclamation of their ancestral heritage does not inherently make them an enemy of true spirituality or divine love. They criticized the mainstream church institutions for aligning themselves with corporate interest and using fear tactics to control the minds of their congregations. This internal theological split completely fractured the organized boycott, leaving the ultra-conservative critics looking increasingly isolated and out of touch with the evolving cultural landscape. Behind the closed doors of his private estate, Michael was reportedly maintaining a disciplined, completely peaceful routine, entirely detached from the toxic media circus carrying his name across the headlines daily. Sources close to his inner circle revealed that he spent hours engaging in traditional meditation, consulting the Ifa oracle for guidance, and studying ancient texts far away from his smartphone screen. His friends noted that he had never looked more grounded, focused, or physically healthy, attributing his intense vitality to the deep spiritual protection he had received during his initiation. The hollow, defeated look that the tabloids had tried to project onto him after his public relationship failure had completely vanished, replaced by an aura of absolute authority. The ultimate climax of this historical controversy arrived when an international film festival announced that it was honoring Sinners with its most prestigious award for artistic bravery and cultural impact. The jury praised RyanCoogler and MichaelBJordan for their uncompromising willingness to dismantle traditional Western cinematic tropes and bring authentic ancestral wisdom to the global screen. This international recognition completely validated the film's artistic integrity, forcing the corporate studios in Los Angeles to quietly abandon their plans to suppress the project's distribution. The global community had spoken, and they had chosen to reward the creators for their defiance, rather than punish them for stepping outside of the corporate-approved lines. In the wake of this massive cultural victory, the entertainment landscape will truly never be the same again, as the invisible lines that once restricted celebrity behavior have been permanently rewritten. MichaelBJordan didn't just survive one of the most intense, highly coordinated cancellation campaigns in modern history. He completely weaponized it to achieve a level of creative and personal freedom that most stars can only dream of. He exposed the profound fragility of a system that panics the moment a successful black man decides he no longer requires their permission, their standards, or their religious frameworks to define his worth. The corporate masters are left holding the pieces of a broken playbook, realizing that the old threats of professional ruin no longer carry weight in a world where the ancestors are actively guiding the trajectory. The legacy of this entire scandal will be remembered as the exact moment when the underground spiritual movement of the African diaspora broke fully into the mainstream consciousness, changing the nature of pop culture representation forever. Other major celebrities are already showing signs of following in his footsteps, openly wearing traditional protective amulets on red carpets and speaking candidly about their ancestral connections in major magazine profiles. The fear has completely dissipated, replaced by an infectious, unstoppable wave of cultural pride and spiritual curiosity that is sweeping through the next generation of creative minds. MichaelBJordan stood directly in the line of fire, absorbed the absolute worst that the corporate machine could throw at him, and emerged completely untouched on the other side. This is not just the story of a Hollywood star changing his path. This is a massive shift in the entire cultural landscape that we are witnessing in real time. MichaelBJordan stood directly in the line of fire, took the absolute best shots the corporate system could throw at him, and walked away completely untouched. Now the blueprint has been completely rewritten. The gatekeepers have lost their absolute control, and a new era of spiritual and creative independence has officially begun. But now I want to hear exactly what you think about this entire historical situation down in the comments below. Do you think MichaelBJordan made the right move by completely breaking away from the traditional Hollywood script to reclaim his ancestral roots? How do you feel about the major corporate studios and religious groups using fear tactics and financial pressure to try and cancel his cinematic vision? Is Sinners just a highly entertaining movie, or is it a deep multi-million-dollar wake-up call for an entire generation of viewers? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if you want more unfiltered truths, and make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive investigation.